Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm George Thomas. Today, Hezbollah threatening revenge on Israel after thousands are injured when their pagers exploded. We'll bring you a look at just how this high-tech attack unfolded and what could come next, including a potential Israel assault on Hezbollah. Israel's battle on multiple fronts are creating a potentially serious problem at home with their food supply, as many farmers go off to the war and farmland is damaged. Here at home, the federal government looking into hate crimes against Jews and other minorities. We'll look at the Senate hearing and the calls for action. And how will the next president handle the major threats facing the world? We'll take a look at the foreign policy agendas of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Those stories and much more today on NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
And we begin, in the Middle East, where Hezbollah is promising revenge following a widespread and devastating strike that left thousands of the terrorist group injured after their pagers. They blew up in their hands and their pockets. Even though no one is claiming responsibility for the sophisticated high-tech operation, which may have taken months to plan, Hezbollah and Iran are pointing the finger at Israel. This was the scene across Lebanon Tuesday. Ambulances carrying thousands to hospitals after a deadly attack on Hezbollah operatives. Thousands of pagers detonated after receiving a message, injuring nearly 3,000 people and killing at least 9 people, mostly members of Hezbollah. The terror group blamed Israel for the attacks and promised revenge. The Israelis have made no comment, and the U.S. says it had no prior knowledge of the attack. The pagers reportedly manufactured in Hungary and purchased by Hezbollah after leadership ordered members to get rid of their cell phones for fear they would be tracked by Israeli intelligence.
The Israelis likely saw an opportunity, bought up thousands of pagers, took them apart, inserted explosives, and then put them back on the market to sell directly to Hezbollah. And then using the radio frequencies that normally bring data into that pager, they simultaneously detonated all of the pagers.
Around 3:30 in the afternoon, the devices exploded in Beirut, eastern Lebanon, and parts of Syria. Among the wounded, the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon. The action is a severe blow to the terror group by disrupting its communications and putting hundreds, even thousands of operatives out of action. This as the Israeli Defense Forces ramp up their presence near the Lebanon border for a potential military action. And an Israeli war with Hezbollah, by the way, may be closer than ever. In the Jerusalem Post, analyst Jeremy Bob writes that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had concerns about the potential casualties from a war against the terror group if it launched 6,000 to 8,000 rockets a day against Israel. But then on August 25th, the Israeli military blew up the vast majority of the rockets and drones with which Hezbollah had intended to attack Israel before these threats could even be launched. Suddenly, Netanyahu has a newfound confidence that he actually can afford a major operation against Hezbollah with much fewer losses to the home front than he had expected. He adds sources have told the Post that if more than 4 to 6 weeks pass without an operation, it may be impossible or much harder to carry out such an operation until spring 2025. That would mean leaving some 60,000 Israelis away from their homes in the north for another 6 months or so, and that's increasingly difficult politically in Israel. Israel's ongoing warfare over the last year across multiple fronts had led to a new concern with farmers leaving their fields to answer the call to arms. The danger of the country's food supply could become a threat to Israel's survival. CBN's Julie Stahl brings us that story.
Since the October 7th attack, almost 90% of Israel's farmers have reported significant damage to land, equipment, and livestock. As for servicing the fields, most foreign workers have fled, and many farmers are serving as reservists, with others included in the 80,000 evacuated from growing hostility in the north.
First of all, the agriculture in Israel is in danger because most of the fields are on on the borders.
This threat resulted in a rapidly convened conference on Israel's food security that included agriculture experts such as Dr. Liron Amdur and Yoel Zilberman of Hashomer HaChadash, an organization focused on preserving the land and helping farmers. Zilberman tells CBN News the war has highlighted the vulnerability of the food supply because so much is imported.
We know that there is one port that got closed because of the Houthis nearby, like in the Red Sea, nearby Eilat. And the danger on our ports is, like the risk is very, very high in Haifa and Ashdod.
He also added declining food production as a critical threat.
Today we are dependent on Ukraine. Today we are dependent on Turkey. Today we are dependent on Jordan. It's unbelievable.
Amdur revealed that on the Global Food Security Index, Israel received a 0 in commitment to food security policy and food accessibility.
About 80% of our calories come from imported food, and especially cereal, which is the basics for what we eat, but also for what the livestock eats, okay? So if we don't have cereals, then we don't have milk, we don't have meat, we don't have eggs, okay? And we hardly produce any in Israel. We produce less than 10% of what we consume.
Agriculture industry had lost like 10,000 farmers in the last 20 years.
Zilberman blames that on the collapse of agricultural collectives known as kibbutzim, combined with the nation's focus on technology and startups. Amdur hopes that given these exposed threats, Israel might see this as a turning point leading to transformation.
First of all, food security became an issue. The Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, I think about a month ago, they changed their name to the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, because there was no government agency to deal with food security in Israel.
Amdur has worked with members of Hashomer HaChadash on a strategy to regenerate agriculture by building on the organization's achievements of the last 17 years.
We actually built the biggest volunteer organization in Israel. Today we have more than 250,000 volunteers that came to help the farmers. We built like a one-stop shop for a farmer in Israel.
They have boarding schools for children that work in the morning for 4 hours on farms, on actual farms, commercial farms, and then they go and study and finish their high school diploma.
And the idea is that these young people will be the future farmers of Israel, including with a youth movement with more than 20,000 kids from all around Israel, including Bedouin kids that wanted to join to our youth movement. They said, we want to be part of this story, part of the story of Israel.
Daniel Chisen has spent his final school year with Hashomer before entering the IDF.
After the army, I would love to be a part of farm work, working on the land. I feel that there's a deeper meaning, an existential meaning. It's tied to our identity and who we are as Israelis.
In looking further into the future, Zilberman moved the focus to technology as a key in sustaining the country.
Bringing in technology and bringing in all the new innovations of AI. I think that in many, many ways, this will build the future in Israel, and we need to do a very, very fast move to make sure that Israel will be food independent.
Julie Stahl, CBN News.
Thank you, Julie. Some serious issues Israel is facing today. Folks, here back at home as hate crimes skyrocket across the United States, lawmakers are sounding the alarm on the growing threat of violent attacks which continue to target Jewish and minority communities. And in our nation's capital, the Senate Judiciary Committee held a hearing addressing that very issue. My colleague CBN's Brody Carter reports on the urgent calls for action. Take a look.
What started as a committee focused exclusively on anti-Semitism on college campuses, Democrats opted instead to broaden the topic to address the rise in all hate incidents across the country.
Since the horrific October 7th Hamas attack on Israel, we have seen an increase in attacks on Jewish Americans, Palestinian Americans, Arab Americans, and Muslim Americans.
60% of all religious-based hate crimes have been directed against the Jewish people. There's something going on here that needs to be addressed.
Despite being only 3% of the population, Jewish Americans have remained at the top of the FBI's list of targeted groups, with anti-Semitic incidents rising more than 300% in the past year alone.
What starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews, and it hasn't taken long already for the public cries from death to the Jews to become death to America and burning flags on our campuses.
Rabbi Goldfeder testified Iran is supporting college protests in America.
Immediately after October 7th, some of these groups, like the National Students for Justice in Palestine, came out and said said, we are not just in solidarity with this movement, we are part of this movement. They chanted, we are Hamas. And when a group tells you that they are trying to provide material support to terrorists, you should believe them.
Rabbi Abraham Cooper, an expert of online hate and terrorism, told CBN's Faith Nation he recently experienced this surge of hate himself.
I was present outside of a synagogue in my neighborhood a few Sundays ago and was bear sprayed by quote-unquote protesters, pro-Palestinian protesters, who were trying to actually penetrate a Jewish synagogue on a Sunday morning.
With Election Day approaching, lawmakers fear political violence and attacks on minority communities could escalate. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Thank you, David. Coming up, even though inflation and illegal immigration are top issues in the presidential election, foreign policy is going to be a major priority for the next president. We'll take a look at some of the international concerns the incoming commander-in-chief will face when we come back. Welcome back. With just 7 weeks until Election Day, early voting is already underway in some states. And that means there's not much time for the two nominees to address key issues, nor for early voters to do their research. But whoever wins will also have a lot of pressing issues on the global stage. CBN national security correspondent Caitlin Burke joins us now with a look at their foreign policy agendas.
With Russia at war in Ukraine and increasing aggression in the Indo-Pacific from China, whoever takes over the White House will need a clear foreign policy agenda.
I think the place I'd begin is to recognize that even though the headlines often seem terrible, the United States remains in a fairly strong strategic position worldwide. We're not fighting any other great powers. We have the strongest system of alliances in history.
When it comes to those relationships, Vice President Kamala Harris says if elected, she would continue to stand by America's partners and ensure the U.S. remains a global leader. She accuses her opponent of taking a more isolationist approach.
Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails and how he would use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States. Not to improve your life, not to strengthen our national security, but to serve the only client he has ever had, himself.
The former president has been critical of alliances like NATO, and if elected, is expected to insist member countries increase contributions to the organization and overall defense spending. As president, he significantly increased the Pentagon's budget and made China and Russia his national security priorities. During the recent ABC News debate, Trump pointed to strong relationships with both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, claiming Russia would not have invaded Ukraine if he were in office.
I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Harris says her administration would continue to support Ukraine's defensive efforts against Russia for as long as it takes.
Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland.
I think both candidates have said useful things about how to go forward. Trump has underscored, including at last week's debate, that he wants the war to end. I'm sure Harris agrees, but she also wants to underscore that Ukraine is in the right and deserves to have its sovereignty and territory and people protected. I think if we begin with those points, we can actually work our way towards a reasonable policy.
Meanwhile, when it comes to China, Michael O'Hanlon with the Brookings Institution believes that Beijing's aggressive stance toward Taiwan will be a major issue for the next president.
China thinks Taiwan's part of China, and we try to deter China by telling Beijing we might respond with U.S. military force if they were to do so, even though there's no American treaty and it's not a formal alliance. That's a delicate line to walk, and it requires sophistication. And both Harris and Trump are either one would have to learn, I think, how to handle that well.
O'Hanlon tells CBN News he'd also like to hear more from both candidates regarding both North Korea and Iran, and encourages each to have a broad priority list when it comes to foreign policy.
I come back to a framing that General Joseph Dunford employed when he was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from 2015 to 2019. And he used to talk about 4+1, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and terrorism/extremism/crime. And I think if we prepare against all 5 of those threats, we're probably doing about as well as we can by way of vigilance.
One last issue that combines key foreign and domestic policy is border security. That's a major topic for Trump, who says he would bring back border policies he had in place while also implementing large-scale deportations. Harris says she would work to bring back President Biden's bipartisan border security bill and focus on more comprehensive immigration reform. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Caitlin. Still ahead, switching gears to entertainment here at home. Our Studio 5 conversation with Danny Gokey. We'll hear from the top 3 finishers on American Idol about his latest musical project right after this. Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Recording artist Danny Gokey first made his musical debut in Season 8 of American Idol, making it to the top 3. Now he has a new music project with a unique fusion of sounds. He calls it the Sound of Heaven. Take a look.
Tell me about the process. I think this is 5th project for you.
5th project. I've been listening to the sound of this world. This place is crazy, makes me want to stay in bed. I've been counting all my worries and my problems. I gotta stop to count my blessings instead. The same process I did with all the other albums, maybe more so as I grow into this. Lord, what are you saying? What is the sound? What is the lyrics? Because if we say what he says, it's much more impactful. Just not that great, right? He's the greatest artist of all time. Oh, thank you, Jesus. Can't believe I get to do this life again. That's where the faith step starts in that. And I just dug in, and you know how God always does. You know, he says, trust the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your understanding. It's my favorite part here. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll direct your path. And so that's what I did, by faith. And now that all the pieces came together, I just love, because the Sound of Heaven really means it's like I'm a diverse kind of artist. And what I mean by that, it's not me patting myself back like, yeah, I'm different. Not that at all. I grew up with a lot of culture. Yeah, I can hear the sound of heaven, oh, and it sounds like joy to me. So that's all infused into this album. Worship, praise, CCN, Afrobeats, which has been like the new thing I've been for the last couple of years. Reggaeton, soulfulness, like it's all wrapped up in there. So when I wrote the song Sound of Heaven, because I didn't know how this album was going to be. You know, in America and a lot of the world, there's this type of music, genres. Radio stations are Christian, country, gospel, country, rock, you name it. And I was like, man, where do we fit? And then I wrote the song Sound of Heaven. I was like, this is how it fits. This is how it fits. And just the Lord just wanted me to be my authentic self. And so I think the album's going to encourage a lot of people. All that to say, you know, I can try to sit there and try to sell it, but I do believe, and I've heard back already, people are being encouraged by it. God is using it. It's healing hearts, healing souls, and I'm thankful for that.
If you had to pick one track, you can't pick Sound of Heaven because we already talked about that one. If you had to pick one track from the project now that would be the favorite in this moment, what is it?
Well, you mentioned the word moment. I have a song called, and truly it's called Only for a Moment. The lead song off the album right now is I Got You, and that's doing really well at radio. But Only for a Moment, it used the metaphor of a seed dying. You know, and how, so even now there's hope buried in the hurt. Before the bloom of a rose is a season in the dirt. You know, so right away it starts with that metaphor of kind of like in the process of dying and things around you dying, and not a very fun experience. But essentially telling people, hey, don't give up just yet. You know, it says, don't dig up those roots just yet. He's watering the ground. The promise of tomorrow stands on what he's doing now. It's only for a moment, so keep holding on. You know, it won't be long. So I hope people find a lot of encouragement in that.
Yeah, I can hear the sound of heaven.
Sound of Heaven is available wherever you purchase your streaming material. Danny's also now on tour with recording artist Torrin Wells. It's called the Take Back Tour. You can go to dannygokey.com/tour for more information. And coming up, a story combining the world of entertainment with Israel. As a dog trainer from Tel Aviv makes it to the finals of America's Got Talent. We'll bring you their story when we come back.
Introducing a brand new way to start your morning, the CBN News Quick Start Podcast. Each weekday morning at 7 a.m., get quick highlights of the day's important news. Then an in-depth analysis that goes beyond the headlines. Insights that matter to people of faith. Discover how God is moving around the world and here at home. Find the CBN News Quick Start Podcast on iTunes or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts, because truth matters.
And finally, today, a dancing duo is heading to the final round of the show America's Got Talent, proving they may have what it takes to become top dog. Roni Sagi is a dog trainer from Tel Aviv who dances alongside her 2-year-old border collie, who is appropriately named Rhythm. The two have captured hearts and high scores with their performances, first going viral online and then dancing on the big stage at America's Got Talent. Wow, that's pretty cool. Folks, that is it for this exciting edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our news program on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Hey, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen by emailing newswatch@cbn.com, or you can talk to us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, which is formerly known as Twitter. We hope you'll join us again next time. From all of us here from the headquarters of Christian Broadcasting Network, have a great day.